Hi everybody, my name is Cindy James. Welcome to my Encaustic art studio. Today I'm going to walk you through the process of how I make encaustic medium. If you've been painting for a while, you've probably realized that it's pretty expensive to buy medium. It's also very economical to make your own. So I'll just show you how I do that. And I thought I would talk as well about my heated palettes and show you what I use in my studio. Okay, let's get going. So I've got my heated palettes warmed up here. As you can see, there's some melted wax here. And I'm going to make my medium in this aluminum pan. You can see I've used it before. The Damar resin often has little bits of bug guts and dirt in it, so there's a little bit still stuck to the bottom there, but it's a pretty clean pan. And this is the R&F Paints heated palette. It's the smaller one. I think it's a 12 by 12. You can get a 16 by 16 palette that has a wire for like a brush holder attached to it. Myself, I just usually put like a wood block so that I can rest my brush off the edge of the palette. But today I'm just making a bit of medium. So these palettes use a heating element. It's called Kitchen Selectives is the brand, and it's basically mounted onto a wooden board, and there's an anodized aluminum plate that is bolted down onto those stands, and it's just basically uptight against the element. So this works pretty good. It holds its temperature really well, and it doesn't smoke as it cycles on and off. So I'm really happy with these griddles. I think they do a great job. The other griddle that I use right now is an Oster white ceramic griddle. I really like this griddle as well, except for the fact that it does cycle on and off more often. So if it's a little bit cold in my studio, what can happen is when there's paint on the palette, especially if I have pots and whatnot, it tends to overheat a little bit where the element is. The element runs, you know, kind of around about an inch in from the edge. So what happens is sometimes that as the griddle cycles on and off, that element gets a little bit too hot for the paint. This is on right now. And so your element basically runs around there. And what can happen is it can actually smoke a little bit. It overheats in order to heat the whole griddle. I mean, it's not intended for encaustic painting, but it does work really well, and I really like the white ceramic in order to be able to see the colors that I'm mixing. So yeah, this is definitely a very serviceable griddle, but you do have to be aware of your ventilation because it can smoke. And I'll show you one of my older griddles, just what can happen over time. So this is my older version of that Oster griddle that I just showed you. And as you can see, it does have a lot of pigment stuck to the surface. And that's just over time, as the element heats up, it does tend to burn those pigments a little bit. And it also does cause some smoking. So I work at very low temperatures, generally as low as I can, and still have liquid wax that's workable. So I'm basically setting my griddle at a temperature that's about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. And yeah, even so with that, what happens is because you have like tins and palettes and brushes sitting on here, that wax and that paint tends to sit for a long period of time, especially underneath the tins is where I see a lot of the pigment sort of get overheated and burn on. I'm reasonably certain you can clean the majority of this off. In fact, this griddle over here had a little spot on it, and I cleaned it off with paper towel and just a little bit of elbow grease, but at some point it probably just would stop coming off. I'm not sure. This griddle isn't that old, like I said, or maybe not. It's less than a year old. So I'll probably try to clean this one up and see how it comes out. Now, just as a note, the anodized aluminum plates on these griddles have also had that same problem, more in the middle where that heating element is. So I have had pigment stick there, and I was able to, just see, some pigments seem to be worse than others, but I was able to clean this off with an SOS pad. So it came pretty clean. There's a couple little specks on there still on this older palette, but just as a heads up, that can happen, especially if you are not the type of person to clean your palette every day. I tend to leave my paint on there. I don't like to waste it, and especially if I'm working on a painting over a period of days, I don't want to clean the paint off my palette. So that's what I'm using right now. So I'll just show you where I keep my encaustic medium. I have a big shelf here, and I actually ended up sticking my medium in these styrofoam coolers that we had kicking around from camping. And I have some R&F, have some of the expensive medium still that I use. It comes in pellets, that's from R&F. And I have a couple of, I also store my raw beeswax. Well, I say raw, but it is filtered. It's something I purchased from a local supplier. I buy it in 1 pound blocks, and I use this to make my medium. I've been saving the pellets in case I really need a nice clear top coat for something, so I don't use the pre-made stuff very often anymore. I usually get the 1 pound blocks just because it's more economical, especially when I'm working on large paintings. It can add up expenses pretty quick. So I have a few blocks in there still, and over here I have another cooler that's got quite a bit in there. I'm a little bit of a hoarder, so I like to make sure I have things on hand. And last fall I started teaching, so I wanted to make sure I had a lot of wax, and then COVID hit, so I haven't really been doing any teaching since then. So anyway, that's where I store it, especially in my garage. It's dusty. In the summertime it gets warm, and this seems to store the wax really well. So here's my little note that I use to make my encaustic medium. So basically I use about a 7-to-1 ratio, so 1 pound of wax. I'm not a great mathematician by any means, so I had to break it all down, and of course I always forget, so this is what I use. The 1 pound wax, 454 grams. I use a 7-to-1 ratio, so I need 65 grams of Damar resin for every pound of wax. So I'm gonna make 2 pounds of medium, and here's my little less than precise scale. It's very old, and here's my Damar resin. So I'm gonna measure out 130 grams of Damar and melt that first. All right, so you can see the Damar is a crystal. It's also kind of powdery, so I usually end up using those chunks first. Where are we at? They take longer to melt, of course, but we're okay. I'm a big fan of the powdery portions. I feel it just has more grit in it, but probably doesn't. All right, I got a little too much there. So let's take out a chunk. Let's get 10, 20, maybe a little more. Yeah, so that's about right. Might be a little bit over. That's okay. I should probably check my wax as well. I'm not, like I say, I'm not really super precise with my measurements, but all right. This thing's a little awkward. Oops, wrong way. how my wax is. I noticed it was a little on the lighter side the last time I bought it, but that one's pretty good. It's a little more than a pound. And this beeswax is not chemically filtered or cleaned or bleached. It's just, yeah, it's a little over a pound too. So they filter it at Aurora Beeswax here in Edmonton. So, okay, I'm just gonna set this up again. You don't need to watch me do that. So this is where I hope to get to. I make usually a couple of sizes at least, and I started making this fun little block here, but this works great for these small tins. It fits perfectly in there, so I like to have this size on hand, and I also like this just to add a little bit, and this is really nice to work on the palette or to drop in one of the other color tins that I have. So I'll usually make some of these, or I'll just open my little drawer here, or my big drawer, or I'll also make paint in this size, just this block as well. So as you can see, I'm a little bit low on medium. Got lots of wax. These are all my scrapings from over the years that I've melted down. So I've decided that I'm going to filter this. So that's kind of how I'm getting to these. When I made these, I didn't strain the wax, so some of it is a little bit gritty and dirty. So I'm just kind of going through it eventually and melting it, straining it, making it into more usable blocks. So that's where I'm at, but I don't have a lot of medium left. All right, so the Damar is melting. I have a brush that's dedicated. You can see it's really sticky. I'll probably have to turn this up a little bit more, which I'll do that. And yeah, once it gets going a little bit more, I'll plop a block of wax in there. So I usually stir it with the actual block of wax. Yeah, you can really see how thick and gooey that is. It's pretty. It's kind of a cool thing to work with. It has a little bit of a peppery smell, I think. And my studio is pretty big, so I don't have my fan open or fan on and my window open, but normally when I'm working in here for a long period of time, I'll open the window, and this fan in the summertime will stay in the window. Right now it's about 20 degrees below zero and snowy. So having my window open really makes it hard to control the temperature. But I'm very conscious of encaustic fumes, and I like to make sure I open the window as much as I can. I also have, this garage is attached to the house, so I usually have that door open a little bit just for some airflow coming in as well. In the summertime, that door, my garage door, is usually open all the way on nice days. So yeah, I usually just keep stirring it with this until I can fit it in the pan. So we're making some progress there. I was able to drop in the first block, and this little bit of wax here, I always save the scrapings off the bottom of my medium when it comes out of my tins, because that's where all the grit will settle. Anything that's still in the wax as it cools, any little bits of dirt or whatever tend to sink to the bottom, and you can scrape those off. So I generally save those little bits of wax and ball them up and save them for the next time I make medium and throw it in to melt. Okay, we're making progress. That Damar is melting. It's taking quite a while. Had to keep bumping up the temperature a little bit. My thermometer is just reading over 150, but I'm suspecting on this end it's a little warmer than the far side. So yeah, pretty soon this should be completely melted. Once this is completely melted, I'll throw in that last block of wax, and then let that melt. Okay, so everything is melted. I've got 2 pounds of beeswax in there with 130 grams of Damar resin. And so you can see there's lots of detritus in there that I would like to strain out. Okay, so yesterday I made medium, and I showed you how to melt the Damar and the wax together. And then when I strained it, I made a huge mess. I decided it was not very helpful to anybody to see that. So I made more medium today, and today I'm going to try to strain this in a more efficient manner and show you that. So I'll just, here's my medium. It's all ready to go. You can see it's got a lot of gunk in it from the Damar resin. So I want to strain that out. So I did find a honey strainer online because I really hate wasting a lot of cheesecloth. Usually I run it through cheesecloth, but I don't like to waste it. So I thought I'd try this honey strainer. It's actually a 2-part strainer. I'm just using the finer mesh, and I'm going to ladle it into this tin, but it doesn't take out everything. So I'm going to still run it through some cheesecloth that I have taped, or well, not taped, but I have a large elastic holding it on top of this tin. So I'm gonna kind of do a 2-part. I'm gonna ladle it into here, which makes it much more manageable, and then I'm going to pour it into here. Yesterday I tried to basically pour it out of this large tin, and it just went everywhere, was splashing around, and was much more wasteful than I would like. So okay, I'm gonna set this up so you can see what I'm doing, and hopefully I have a better result today. Okay, here we go. Wish me luck. Okay, just gonna ladle this through the mesh. It's quite golden, but I find by the time it cools, it's usually much less of a golden color, especially once you run it through the mesh and the cheesecloth. It probably takes out a little bit of the color. Yeah, this seems to be working pretty good. This is the same amount of what I made yesterday, and I'm not wasting nearly so much. I probably could have set this right on the cheesecloth. Maybe I will try that next time. Okay. Most of that dirt and whatever settles to the bottom of the dish, so it might not be as messy as before, and that gets hot, so I'm going to need some paper towel. Okay, so I'm going to run this. There's still a little bit of detritus in there, so hopefully I can run this through the cheesecloth without making a big mess. And usually the cheesecloth will pick up whatever was missed. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to get my tin and transfer this into my tin right now too, because I don't want that to cool in there. Okay, so it kind of gets hard to take this elastic off without dipping my cheesecloth into the wax. Oh, I'm sure there's people out there with better systems than what I have, but this is where I'm at in my encaustic medium making journey right now, and it's very nice and clear. I don't know if you can see, but yeah, it looks great. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stick with the same process because it actually did work pretty good. These black oven liners are really great to work on for encaustic because they clean up really nice. They handle any heat. I like these red silpat mats as well, but they're a little difficult to clean with a heat gun and a paper towel. These clean up a lot quicker. So, although the silpat mats do protect my counter, just kind of layering on top. All right, let's do this again. And I'm just gonna keep ladling until this is gonna be easy for me to pour out. One thing about these R&F palettes is you have to be careful when you stick your hand in there to adjust the temperature because it's a little close to the plate on the top. Yeah, encaustic medium is expensive to buy, so I definitely try to waste as little as possible, make it by myself as much as I can, and you know, try not to waste materials as well. But I do find it to be messy. So I haven't talked about the floor of my studio, but I have laminate on, this is in my garage. I have laminate on the floor. When we renovated this for my art studio, we had leftover flooring from when we did our house over the years, and it had been sitting in the shed for, oh, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 years. So I said to my husband, well, why don't we just put laminate down? And he has a motorcycle, and so we were gonna just leave a space for the motorcycle and like just put it down and park on it. So he does. But the laminate is awesome because I actually I knocked a pot of white over and it spilled right down the other side of my cupboard here, and I had a big pool of white wax on the laminate. I just let it cool and scraped it up. Other than it getting into the cracks, like the joins a little bit, it came right off. I just took a heat gun and very lightly warmed it up, wiped it up. It all came off, no damage at all. So I gotta say, the laminate is a good floor for, I'm sure hardwood would be as well, but the laminate is great. Okay, last one. We have the elastic on there, great, but I think it'll be okay. And this one I can probably just pour out. As you can see, the worst of it, maybe you can see, settles into the bottom. And, oh, I missed. Yeah, I was doing good till that. Just didn't pay enough attention there. I usually give the pan a little wipe out. I let it warm up again and wipe it out, but I did spill. I wasn't being careful. Okay, here's the last little bit. If you pour slow too, then the fine little bits tend to sit in the bottom there. And I like to keep the cheesecloth pretty clean. Maybe I'll actually. All right, except for that moment of inattention, one's doing pretty good. Okay, take that off. Kind of squeeze this out a bit. I should be able to use this quite a few more times, especially if it stays reasonably clean. And how hot is that? That's not too bad. Okay, and so I'm going to make some more of these little cakes. All right, 3 of these, and yeah, I'm done. So to clean this, what I've been doing is I either use a heat gun, melt it out, I've sat it on the hot pallet and just wiped it out, and it comes pretty clean. I flip it over, sort of heat it up from this way, but it takes a few minutes, but at least it's reusable, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. So, all right, when these are cool, I can pop them out, and then what I usually do is scrape anything that that I may have missed. It settles to the bottom. I scrape off the bottom and save that wax for the next time. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.